Yes, that's it, said the Hatter with a sigh. It's always tea time. Lewis Carroll, Alison Wonderell. Tea, the most consumed drink in the world, second to only water. It's not just tea, it's a culture. According to the National Tea Association of the USA, tea can be found in around 80% of American homes, so it's very likely you have some in your house. And 2 billion cups are made and drank worldwide every single day. I drink it once or twice every day, which is kind of a lot. Here I have tea in a Starbucks cup, ironically. I have drank iced tea my whole life and only recently have been drinking hot tea. And I'm sure everyone's tried, or at least almost everyone has tried tea in one of its forms. Tea is one of the most culturally important drinks in the world. To prove this, we'll touch base on tea's rather interesting history and how it's a very significant part of many people's cultures and beliefs throughout the world. Tea has been around for about 5,000 years, and it's something we consider a happy little accident in legend only. According to Chinese legend, a man named Shennong, who is known as the father of traditional Chinese medicine, was boiling water under a tree, and then so some of the leaves from the tree fell into the boiling water, and it was for the king, and it created a refreshing taste and started this era. We don't know how true the story really is, probably not. We do know that it did originate in China, used originally for medical purposes, with evidence of tea in tombs from the Han Dynasty. This is from the History of Tea, 2022. While we do know the true origin of tea, there's still some really radical legends about it. For example, there's a Japanese story that there was a Buddhist monk and he was meditating and he fell asleep meditating, and he was so mad at himself for falling asleep that he ripped his eyelids off and threw them on the ground, and from that sprouted a tea plant that cleared and refreshed his mind. Aoyang, 2012. As to how the tea reached the rest of the world, we have a very clear history. The spread of the tea across the world informs us that tea traveled to Japan by the way of a Buddhist monk around the year 1200. It was a drink primarily for the wealthy in the Netherlands in 1610, which was 400 years later. They spread it across Europe from about 1638 to 1650, and the fact that Europe got it so much later than the rest of the world is really surprising because now we associate tea with Europe a lot. Finally, the Dutch introduced it to North America in the mid to late 17th century. As we see how tea got to the rest of the world, we can see how it impacted it. The Chinese are tea experts of the world, of course, because they started it, and the Royal Museum's Greenwich tells us that it's served on special occasions such as weddings, holidays, and so that the younger generations grow up with respect for the elders. One of their specific traditions is on New Year's, where they drink sweet red tea, so the sweetness will come up to pass on onto the upcoming year. Tea making is something they don't take lightly. There's this very specific way it has to be made, and it's called a tea ceremony. And there's YouTube videos and a whole process. While China basically invented tea, Turkey's love for it is not to be underestimated. They're the largest consumers of tea in the world, and on average, every person in Turkey consumes about 7 pounds of tea a year, which is crazy. In Turkey, it represents hospitality and friendship, so you just find it everywhere, at any occasion. They actually drink their tea from tulip-shaped cups, which I thought was interesting. Smith, 2021. Now, of course, I can't mention tea without mentioning us. In the US, we invented iced tea, actually. We drink about 3 billion gallons a year, and 85% of it's iced. Not only did we invent iced tea, we also brought tea bags into the world, which is something we use quite often. Reese, 2014. We don't have many cultural traditions with it, but we have a big historical event in which explains why it isn't as popular as its rival, which is coffee. And tea was a way of England enslaving America, said Caroline Frank, a PhD professor of American Studies at Brown University. And because of that association, many Americans are biased towards tea. I hope everyone learned a thing or two about the cultural significance of tea, because I honestly had never thought it was such a big topic. We discussed the broad history of it and how it made its place in 3 different cultures, but we know of 50 more countries that drink tea with their own views and traditions on it, so it's just a really huge thing. Even though it's likely you prefer coffee over tea, the next time you drink tea, you'll probably remember the dark Japanese tale of its origin, the eyelids ripping off and just the craziness.